All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the 212th Governance and Risk meeting here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of the governance facilitators here. Happy to be hosting you on our weekly governance and risk call. We didn't have one last week due to a large contingent of the DAO being down at DevCon. So we got a pretty exciting show this week to make up for it. Joined by a bunch of awesome people who both contribute and care about the Maker ecosystem. So thank you if you're here live, and if you're watching the recording later, that's awesome too. So hello. If you'll take me to the next slide, David, we'll get into a few ground rules for today's call before we get started. So next slide, please. Pretty basic stuff, right? Like let's try not to talk over each other. If you're here and you can't have your camera on, if you're into that thing, like please do. It's always nice to see a bunch of smiling faces, even faces when they're not smiling as well. We have reactions in Zoom and chat as well. So if you'd like to join the conversation, one of the easiest ways you can do so is going over to reactions using the raised hand feature. That'll let me know that you have something to say, and I can call on you when the current speaker finishes talking up. If you're unable or unwilling to use the microphone, you can always drop your ideas or questions in chat, and I can read them out at an appropriate time. I'll try to remember to introduce people, but the easiest way is to have you introduce yourself. So when you go to speak, let everyone know who you are and where you're talking from. And this is an open call, so please ask questions and be engaging. It's a more fun call for everybody if we're all participating. My voice gets pretty tiring after a few minutes, as you'll certainly find out. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, just DBAA, right? We're all here to learn, have a good time, and thanks for joining us. So we'll go on to the agenda. Pretty standard looking call today. We'll start with our governance roundup, going over the votes, what's happening in the land of our maker improvement proposals, and the forum. We do have some DevCon Bogota recaps to give for our initiative updates. So a few of the facilitators who are down there will be telling you guys what they got up to. And for discussion today, we got two perhaps juicy topics, one being the real world finance offboarding, and lastly being the EndGame PreLaunch MIPs. Both of those have votes that are ending on Monday, so pretty timely from a governance perspective. And I think that's more than enough preamble, so let's get into what's happening in the land of votes. Pretty short list to go over, at least for my segment. We did have a green light poll end on Monday. That was the Anchorage lending crypto mining green light poll. That was deferred, so did not get more yes votes than no votes, meaning that the community did not signal that they want us to spend more time investigating it. In our next segment, you'll hear about the 9 ongoing ratification polls with voting ending on Monday. For the executive, at least a little bit before this call, we still didn't have yesterday's passed. There was around 71,000 MKR supporting it. Those were the debt ceiling instant access module changes for real world assets 007, that's Monotask Clydesdale, and some parameter changes for the GUSD PSM, that's PEG stability module, just so we can get all of the acronyms in and give me a mouthful. Next week, we're looking at an Rocket Pool ETH onboarding, Oasis App Oracle whitelisting, and some StarkNet housekeeping. Awesome. So without further ado, I will pass the mic off to one of our MIP editors, Pablo, to tell you what's happening in MIPs land.
Yep, thank you, Peyton, and hello, everyone. Pablo here with a MIPs update. So the October ratification polls are closing next Monday. There are 9 of them, and we are now going to take a look at a rather low-res tally of the votes so far. So the EndGame PreLaunch MIP set has 92% of positive votes. The 3 related yet independent coordinated findings for strategic happiness, events, and real-world finance similarly have a high degree of approval. Further, we have a MIP 81, Coinbase USDC institutional rewards, passing with 85% of positive votes. MIP 82, Monetalis Coinbase Appaloosa, passing with 77%. The SBF to fund legal domain work to onboard Black Tower Credit is passing with 100%, and so too is the real world finance facilitator offboarding, which would only come into effect if the real-world finance offboarding in the previous slide fails. And finally, we have the facilitator offboarding process adjustment that too is passing, albeit with lower approval. Let's now move on to the proposals in RFC, all of which are eligible to enter the November governance cycle, with the only exception of MIP-90, which is eligible to enter the January cycle at the earliest. So there's a lot of proposals. I'll try to keep it short. We have 6 standalone MIPs in RFC, MIP-80, which describes how MKR will be used to recruit, retain, and align interest in MakerDAO. MIP-86, whereby CoinShares aims to manage about 13% of the PSM's USDC and invest it. MIP-87, which aims to deploy up to 33% of the PSM's USDC into origin dollar to earn yield without giving up custody, nor going through a centralized service. MIP-88 from Monetalis aims to onboard and activate a real-world asset vault for the purpose of acquiring USDC via the PSM and then use it to purchase RMBS through 𝘱𝘳𝘰𝘳𝘦 securitization platform. And likewise, MIP-89 from Monetalis aims to set up a real-world asset vault and acquire BlackRock iShares ETF products allocated in the same manner as MIP-65, with Monetalis being an arranger for green economy lending. Finally, MIP-90, which is eligible to enter the January cycle, aims to onboard and activate a real-world asset vault to acquire USDC via the PSM that will then be used to purchase diversified AAA-rated or equivalent structured credit and money market funds. So a lot of proposals here. Further, and finally, we have 6 coordinate budgets for DUX, for Immunify Security, who also submitted a mandate modification, GovComs, SideStream Auction Services, TechOps, and SES. And we also have a MIP-84 C10 proposal to raise the protocol-owned fault emulations upper limit. MIP-84 is part of the EndGame PreLaunch MIP set that's currently being voted on. I try to keep it short, and let's now take a look at the important dates. November the 2nd is the last day to introduce modifications in proposals aiming to enter that governance cycle, and the formal submission window for November opens on November the 7th. That's pretty much all from me. Thank you very much.
And that was great, Pablo. A lot of MIPs to get through, and appreciate the summary on all those. I dropped a link in the chat if you want to go over any of that a bit slower on your own time. But thanks for introducing that, Pablo. Next, I think we have a special video segment recorded from Artem, giving you an update on the forum. We want to kick that off.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's forum recap, covering the week of October 14th to the 19th. And huge thanks to Ashton for helping us write these summaries. Now, just the other week, we finished DevCon, but it feels like the forums are back into full gear, as we will mention several exciting announcements, as well as steps taken forward towards the endgame plan. But let's begin with our top announcements by welcoming our latest recognized delegate, Cal Blockchain, also known as Blockchain at Berkeley. The group actively participates in governance on Uniswap, Aave, Compound, Didex, and Optimism, and they plan to provide a student perspective on MKR ideologies, also perform quantitative analysis of impact and risk, and facilitate collaboration and community engagement in the Bay Area. Now, you could learn more about them on their team's website at blockchain.berkeley.edu. And also, don't forget to join the upcoming Meet Your Delegate call happening on October 26th, next week at 17:30 UTC, as Cal Blockchain plans to present their platform and open the floor to any questions from the community. Next up, Synesthesia announces the MakerDAO Talent Branch platform, created to onboard more talent to the MakerDAO ecosystem with the main goal of reducing friction and costs of when hiring new people. Now, anyone can apply to join or refer a colleague and earn bounty rewards for doing so. 𝘧𝘪𝘶 is asking the community for feedback on the design and the user experience of the platform. So if you want, check it out and leave a comment on the post, or you can find him on Discord to share your thoughts. And finally, let's talk about the highly anticipated release of Maker Academy, announced as a press release discussing their initial launch of the Maker Academy brand and team, which is a slick educational platform aimed at helping newcomers understand the complexities of MakerDAO and DeFi. So while many community members view this undertaking as valuable, some do have concerns about its cost effectiveness and the potential impact. And if you have any thoughts or comments about their platform, please make sure to join the post's conversation and share your feedback, comments, or just give them a thumbs up. And next, I want to quickly spread some visibility and awareness on the latest EndGame activity that happened this week. There were 2 new MetaDAO proposals submitted. First, which is the tie-dye cluster, and we also had the spring cluster submitted. Additionally, Rune posted his ideas on further expanding endgame goals, motivations, and integrations into clean money and nuclear energy initiatives. And finally, A16Z shared their thoughts on the endgame plan through a strategic lens, as well as which MIPs they may likely vote on. If you're a fan into short summaries, we have summaries about each one of these in our latest weekly relay issue that was just posted earlier today. So go check it out. And from here, I'll move on to our active signal requests. And we currently have 2 signal requests active. And our first one, posted by Nonstop Theo, gathers community sentiment on whether to clear 1.3 million DAI of bad vault debt that has not yet been liquidated, and what would be the best approach in doing so. Now, the options include liquidating the insolvent accounts, burning DAI from the surplus buffer, or repaying the outstanding debt. Now, the signal request will run until October 31st at 2 a.m. UTC. And the current vote breakdown for poll number 1, which asks, shall MakerDAO clear the vault's bad debt? The leading option is yes. The leading vote is yes. And for poll number 2, what is the preferred option to clear the bad debt? The leading vote is to liquidate the insolvent accounts. Now, let's move on to our second signal request, posted by Alan Peterson, which proposes the following allocation of 500 million DAI reserved under MIP 65. Now, this allocation is aimed at addressing 2 primary considerations, which are 1, corporate bond performance under a recession, and 2, general market volatility. Now, the signal request will run for a few more days until October 22nd at 12 a.m. UTC. And the current vote breakdown, it's a pretty simple vote. Should we reallocate or not? And the leading vote is yes to reallocate. And if you haven't yet voted on these signals, please do so. There's still some time left. But other than that, that's it from me. If you'd like to read on more information about the announcements, discussions, signal requests, and help wanted that's happening each week, please check out both the forum recap and the weekly relay threads. And take care.
Right on. Appreciate that digital dispatch, Artem. I just launched a poll. If you want to participate in that, let us know for the future as we plan these weekly calls. That would be helpful. We'll leave that running for a few moments here as we continue on. Artem says no hard feelings, so feel free to go honestly. So I won't bias the results by giving you a sneak peek, but I will, once we close it, show what everyone's responses were. Give you about 15 more seconds to participate. Don't want to waste too much time, but this is super valuable for us for putting together a meeting. So really appreciate you participating for those here. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to drop a comment on our YouTube channel. Maybe that'll get more people watching it. Who knows? All right, that's a minute with like 30 participants. That's not too bad. I'll end the poll and share the results for a moment. And we can get back to it, David.
Yeah, sweet. Also, the recording was posted on YouTube as its own like short segment. So 𝘰𝘮𝘳 had asked what's the reason to pre-record it, and I think one is just like just being more careful and finer tuned about how we present things. So you could always do a take 2 or take 3 versus live, where you're just going kind of shooting from the hip. And then number 2, we want to provide like short clips anyway, that might be useful for delegates and other stakeholders. So yeah, we're just trying things out and experimenting.
Yeah, appreciate giving it a go.
Hey.
All right. Cool, you're back in full screen. We look good there, at least on my end. Let's continue on. I believe that'll take us to our initiative updates. Excellent. And I couldn't remember if we had the other slide or this one first. So as we mentioned at the top of the call, we did have several core units, members of the DAO, a bunch of maker people, past and present, down in Bogota. So we would love to hear a little bit of stories from people who were there, what they got out of it, that sort of thing. We invited any of the core unit facilitators to make a slide. I don't know, David, I'm happy to turn the mic over to you and let you present it, but that's the general idea here.
Yeah, thanks, Peyton. So I put together some, slideshow of just some photos, but ultimately we had 10, about, I think 10, according to my records, core units represented, 2 different recognized delegates. There were 7 maker-led talks at DevCon alone, and that doesn't count all the other stuff that happened at side events like Shelling Point. There were many maker OGs, so I saw a ton of ex-maker people that are already working on other projects in the space. And ultimately, there were many side events, dinners, and places for maker folk to connect. And so let's kind of just do a quick slideshow of like what it looked like, right? So on the left was the DevCon venue. You can see inside. On the right, you see 𝘬𝘪𝘀 very intensely telling people the right solution at a workshop. We see Bartek here doing a really awesome talk on risk for bridges. We see 𝘱𝘳𝘰𝘗 and Emily from 𝘱𝘳𝘰𝘗 from Data Insights and Emily from Chain Security doing a stats on MakerDAO vote delegation. And on the right, we see Juan leading a panel for funding the commons. And then, we see Strategic Happiness supplying a ton of swag, absolutely nailed the swag drop for this conference. I think everybody who I gave socks to was extremely happy, and it was a great way for me to network. So I appreciate that. Oh yeah, only 3 hours in customs. We did like random swag drops at various venues. We had a really great MakerDAO stakeholder dinner. We had a reservation for 50, but it ended up being, I think, around 60 people. And all in all, it was just a very, very lovely night. As you can see, everybody's mingling after all the food came out, or maybe before the food came out. Other dinners happened on the side as well. Then, of course, we had Divinity. The events team really brought it. They had this really, really sweet chandelier light thing that actually their in-house team guy, I think it was Jacek, or I can't remember his name, but kudos to him. That thing was really awesome. A lot of good vibes and dancing happened. A lot of networking happened that night. As you could see, people of various stakeholder groups hanging out, seeing each other. A few teams had offsites and things like that. As you see here, Dux is pictured. Also, big props to 3F Delegate for doing a couple of episodes of drinks with delegates, but also delegates at DevCon. So if you want to see some coverage done by Frank, check it out. He made a couple of really cool videos. And that's it for the pictures and the videos that I featured. But ultimately, from the GovCom's perspective, I was really happy to be there representing my team and meeting with delegates, meeting with people that I work with on a weekly and daily basis, like Peyton and many others. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and I had a fantastic and productive time. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Peyton.
Right on. So I was there. Also for the first time, more than just me from my team was there. You can see the three of us. I was the one taking the picture, I suppose, at one of the Gitcoin passport workshops there in DevCon. Had a really great time. We were able to squeeze in a hybrid offsite, which was very fun. Yeah, I don't know. You can read so well bore you with too many details, but for me, the experience was really special. Like what I enjoyed about it was a couple of my team members' first conference there, at least first major one. So that allowed them to go to a lot of talks, get to meet a lot of people. Meanwhile, I was in the background having a lot of meetings with the delegates, other platforms, a lot of reputation teams seem to be kind of the hot button topic there. So I found it really valuable for people of all different experience levels. And yeah, really excited. I've had 2 calls today already with a couple of people I met there following up and trying to plan some cool stuff for the DAO. So definitely more stuff to come there. But it was a really great experience getting to be with the team, getting to participate, and in particular getting to facilitate one of the workshop, I guess, problem spaces for Dennis. So that's my bit. Nice seeing everyone there. See some of you on this call.
David, I think I'm up.
Yeah, take it away, Robert.
Hello, everyone. A few CES highlights from DevCon. Before I get into the details, I want to make a little bit of a public service announcement. And while my emojis might make you smile, it's actually a reminder to all of us. In the West, we enjoy a lot of freedoms, and many don't have to think about our safety and health. These same principles are not upheld in many parts of the world. This is also true of our Maker coworkers. I encourage all of you to think about this as we communicate publicly in writing and with any personally identifiable information. If you're not sure if you're going to dox someone or are not aware of their choice, please err on the side of not sharing. I'm speaking from actual experience, and this is not my opinion. Thanks for your consideration, everyone. And now I'll go back to DevCon. So this was the first IRL meeting of the CES core unit since we were ratified over a year ago. And we also held a one-day offsite to talk about the overall direction of CES as it relates to the endgame plan. After being together for almost a week, it was a great reminder to me on why getting together in person is so important. I also reflected on how this relates to MakerDAO as we come to the end of the endgame MIPS vote. While some would push for removing people and relationships from the equation, my opinion is that we need to do the opposite. There are far more ways we can accomplish what we're trying to achieve by working together, seeing people face to face, and trying to solve some really challenging issues. And yes, there will be issues that come up. I wonder, given the past 6 months, how much easier it would have been for the DAO to resolve some of the really thorny issues we had if we were all locked in a room together. It was encouraging to hear talk about a get-together IRL after the endgame vote. I fully support this and recommend this next action. A meeting with Rune combined with key individuals in the DAO could be super productive for us and to work through how we get to the actual launch of the MetaDAOs. So now back to DevCon highlights. So no ants and guns and roses at 𝘱𝘰𝘗𝘦 is unrelated, although I'm sure they ate some ants because they did show up that night for the CES team meeting, and it wasn't an honor for us, but they were there. Most of the CES team members also ate the ants. I have to say personally, they had no impact on me. Turning around on the escalator and seeing Nick, then him saying, "What are you doing right now? Do you want to hear Snowden speak?" And then we were off to ZK House. Andrew Bourbon, man, you delivered once again. The swag rocked, and I really appreciate what you did, Bourbon. Thanks for all your help these many years in MakerDAO. I think we all left the team dinner wondering who Fernando was. There were more than 50 of us that showed up at dinner, and no one knew the reservation name. There was no way we were getting in without that name. And the bouncers were serious, by the way. And I think they were packing heat. I have to say that this dinner was one of my top highlights. And it was so great to see the maker folks in one room and the conversations that had in that few hour time span. I'd also ask everyone to send some good juju to Soren and his knee. He did manage to show up for the maker dinner, pain pills and all, but I couldn't figure out how he got up on that table and was dancing. And of course, 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝑗𝑦, everyone. A huge shout out to the organizers and everyone that showed up. It was an awesome event. And I want to thank everyone that participated in DevCon, whether you spoke, whether you attended, where you were there just to learn something. I think we're already all looking forward to �ＥTH Denver. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Peyton or David.
Awesome. Appreciate that update, Robert. A lot of stuff I'd forgotten within the week's time span. It's funny how many stories and wonderful moments there are. Cool. Well, I know there was a lot more of us at DevCon than presented today. So if you want to drop lessons learned, fun moments, those sort of things from the forum, would love to see it from more of the participants. Thanks for asking us to get that together, David. Looks like we're tabbed out of the presentation.
Apologies, 1 second.
Wouldn't be a GNR call without a little bit of technical difficulties. So awesome. So we do have September financials. We decided this week we did not have a presenter for them, so that is hyperlinked in the show. You can type that in on the forum as well if you want to see what's going on with MakerDAO's overall financial picture.
All in all, September was rough. But yeah, read the report for the numbers.
Fun. Cool. That'll take us to the discussion segment. I know David prepared some stuff, so happy to hand over the mic to you and have you walk us through it.
Yeah, sure thing. So we have a couple of different discussion topics. The first one, which is our secondary topic, is the real-world finance offboarding. Several delegates were requesting some points of clarity, and so provided some questions. And so we're going to do kind of two sections, one on real-world asset collateral status itself, and then the core unit ops is a separate concern. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the collateral status. And for this, I'm going to hand it over to Robert, who put together the slide and has all the info.
Actually, David, it's Mabel.
All right, Mabel, it's you.
Hi, David. Mabel Tong here. I'm the collateral program manager with CES. I'm happy to provide an update on the status of RWA collaterals. We've been in contact periodically with Will for the purpose of maintaining continuity. We have also reached out to touch base with every active RWA collateral application. We had a meeting with Will in the beginning of September when he laid out a plan to assess and document risk and loan management of all 7 onboarded RWA collaterals with a goal to hand them over to CES by mid-October. This effort was halted on September 16th when the forum post questioning fund transfers to RWF CU prompted Rune to call a stop on their spending. So I think the work stopped right there. Last week, SES hosted a call with CES and growth core units to oversee the transition. Will reported that his team had completed the reports on HVB, SocGen, and 6S. And he started sharing these documents with CES as of yesterday. We will set up another call with Will to review the current state of the remaining collaterals. And those are the collaterals onboarded through Centrifuge, including Council Freight, Fortunify, Harbor Trade Credit, and New Silver. We are in the process of uploading those documentation to CES as well. We have also scheduled introduction meetings with these partners in the next week. So the next steps for us is number one, to review and assess the onboarded RWA collaterals and provide a status summary on the forum. Secondly, we need to establish some sort of a reporting and management process so we can continue to manage these collaterals. That's pretty much the update. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If there are no questions, then I'm going to hand it back to you, David, to discuss the other items.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Mabel. And also feel free to post any questions in chat. We could always come back to them for the people in the call. All right, so moving forward, there were some questions brought up by various delegates around the core unit operations and offboarding process itself. And I did manage to get some responses from Will that I'll cover in the next slide. But yeah, so the main questions are, what are the status of the people hired by Will? And what's the status of the distribution of the MKR vest? Who is the appointed interim facilitator who will oversee the return of funds? And then the two related questions there are, how will the golden parachute be managed? How can we ensure that funds go to the contributors? And is the golden parachute only for the facilitator, or is it for the team? Then we have the question of what work was actually done in the last 60 days since the firing of Eric, Tej, and Christian. And lastly, how can future offboarding, this is a more general question, how can future offboardings of facilitators and core unit members reduce the possibility of grifting? And so really quickly, I'm going to go back to the slide before, but I shared the questions with William, and the general answer that he gave was basically this, that he's working with the auditor, aka SES, and 𝘱𝑗𝑚 to manage the both the MKR distribution and the golden parachute and pretty much all of that, as well as payouts to former contributors if those are necessary. There's a proposal pending for that, for the auditor to handle the MKR distribution, so this isn't final. And SES, feel free to hop on the mic and speak to that if you'd like. Auditor and 𝘱𝑗𝑚, yeah, manage the severance pays. So yeah, basically I just said that. And then no one has appointed the interim facilitator. I believe in the MIP, the interim facilitator is supposed to manage those payments and the offboarding process. And I think, the entire team has been offboarded or is being offboarded, so there's no interim facilitator. And basically it's just 𝘱𝑗𝑚 and SES is my understanding that's helping Will with the offboarding process. So yeah, that's all the information I got from Will. I'm gonna pause there, go back to the question slides, and I'm gonna give it over to Robert because I see Robert has a hand raised.
Thanks, David. Hey, just I want to be clear on the scope of the interim facilitator. And so it sounds as if we're looking for someone to simply wind down the core unit. And the reason why I want to make this distinction is because, there's the CU operations that, yeah, we need as a community to figure out what to do there, but there's the work as well. So there's no work going on in the RWF core unit anymore. It's being offboarded. So let's just be clear that if any interim facilitator is proposed, their only role is to essentially get the monies to where they need to go and then shut things down. So I just wanted to make more of a comment than anything else.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Robert. Juan, yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly clarify that the role of the auditor is just to make sure that what governance said is happening. So that's pretty much it. So that I think that the answers look a bit, I don't know if ambiguous, like there's not a lot to work with from those answers. But my point is that that's the role of the auditor, is not to set up agreements and work on stuff. The auditor just needs to do what governance asks for. So that's the only clarification from our side.
Yeah, Will mentioned it was a pending proposal, and yeah, thank you for clarifying that. It's not the typical role of the auditor to do that. And I think, yeah, in the absence of the interim facilitator, yeah, I guess like a path is being sought. So yeah, I'm gonna pause here and kind of like open it up for anybody in the call who has information or comments on these questions to feel free to fill in the gaps. And then, yeah, there is that general question on below, which I think actually one of the MIPs and RFC for changing the facilitator offboarding parameters to be able to do the facilitator offboarding quicker kind of addresses the grifting or like, you know, that kind of that question. But yeah, so I'll pause there and open it up to the participants.
I guess kind of likewise, I can hop in and say GovAlpha's role is okay if MIP specifies something needs to happen. That's kind of our job to help get that into an exec. So in particular for the offboarding proposal by Rune, it does mention those items of golden parachute, MKR vesting, a few other small details like that. So that would be basically our role in there is if the MKR builders pass the MIP, we try to make sure that can be executed in a timely manner. So you'll hear about it on one of these calls if it's passed and we have to take action there.
Yeah, and for the sake of the recording, I see louder from SCS mentioned with regards to the payments, because they go through our standard payment operator, only formal invoices get paid. So the money isn't sent to Will to distribute. It's the payment processor who pays the individual invoices for those team members, all of whom went through the payment processor's KYC AML process.
Yes, I'll chime in here, 3F delegate, the platform. I guess with regards to that, and I think I just saw Sebastian pretty much post what I have in mind, right? Like, you know, I worked in the real world, obviously. Anybody can make an invoice, right? So the question of grifting is mine. It's public, right? So there's no denying that. So from 3F delegates' point of view, the easiest way I can say it is that, you know, I'm worried that in the near future, we're going to onboard other DAO ecosystem individuals who can possibly do the same thing. So I think it's important that we kind of, you know, start onboarding individuals who are, you know, going to have the best intent in heart when it comes to making sure that this DAO is prospering from their work. You know, and it's a new paradigm. It's not, you know, having a timesheet and asking, as an example, and not picking on you, GovAlpha, but asking Peyton, you know, what did you do on Monday from 9 to 5? Or what did you do on Tuesday, you know, from whatever, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.? You know, it's about having ecosystem contributors that are going to produce good results, are going to be honest. If you get offboarded, you know, life goes on. Who knows, you might end up working for 𝘊𝘬𝘴 for all you know, but just doing the right things to do the proper steps to offboard your core unit or your entity, what have you, and to make sure that DAO is getting in return value for what you're getting paid for. So I think that's just my biggest concern going forward. What's happened in the past is in the past. I'm thinking more about the future, how we can avoid, you know, having ecosystem individuals that are going to provide services to the DAO and not going to, I guess, be honest, or as the new post by Rune talks about good meta and giving back to society, just being here for good reason, right? Because you really believe that this is the future of the workforce, of the metaverse workforce, whatever you want to call it. That's just my biggest concern. And I think we got to be really careful when we, you know, hire my next door neighbor and he's just in it for the dollars and dies, whatever you want to call it. So that's just my biggest concern, right? Just getting back to the point of the invoices, right? Anybody can make an invoice. So hopefully work has been delivered. I don't know. There's no way we'll ever prove it or not, but that's just something that I think the MKR token owners should keep in mind for the future. And also ecosystem clusters or meta DAOs or core units when hiring is super important to make sure you get someone who's really in it, because we all have the same future goals.
Thanks, Frank. Seen a lot of good stuff in the chat here. Might pause for a second, invite anyone who might want to come on the mic. Otherwise, happy to read off some of these questions. Yeah, go for it, Robert.
Yeah, one of the things that I continue to press forward is this concept of vetting. And we're entering into a really interesting time with the EndGame and then launching the meta DAOs, however that might happen. And even to some extent, the selection of the delegates. It's like anybody who wants to participate potentially got something. So I just wonder about what is our vetting process? Like, and sure, right, we're all concerned about doxing too, right? So there's the anon piece of this, but it's just like if we have a culture of anyone is allowed to come into the door and present something and it gets voted on, then that's fine, right? That's just the way our culture works. But then we shouldn't be surprised if things happen outside of our control and people do things that we wouldn't anticipate. But there's also history too, right? So we all start with good intentions, and then not everyone might act with good intentions. And I'd love to say everyone's going to take the high road, and I think we try to start there, but sometimes it gets down into the layers of not taking the high road anymore. So there's some really fundamental issues here that I think that we could address with the change. If the EndGame MIPs pass, and looking at, for example, what are the meta DAOs that are being proposed? Are they necessary? Who are the people on those teams, right? Collectively, are these the things that are needed for Maker to make the biggest impact moving forward? Because at the end of the day, it's all about MakerDAO, right? At least if it isn't, shouldn't it be? And it's important for us to always look out for MakerDAO's best interest. So I just, some comments for me, raising some points, but I really think a vetting process in some way could be a really important addition to the culture of MakerDAO.
Thanks for that, Robert. Got at least one person confirming they'd like their question read, so I'm gonna hop there now to one from MakerMan, who's asking, is once reward finance offboarded, what is the wind down time / close date on the invoice submission? When does this close formally? So perhaps the auditors might be a good person to ask for that. I know on the GovAlpha side, right, there are a number of things on the MIP itself that are specified, like MKR transfer, the 𝘱𝘰𝘮𝘮𝘭𝘢𝘵𝑚. So at least for my team, we have to work out, all right, what is the auditor sending? What is the team capable of taking themselves from the operational wallet? And what is the difference? And then our intent would be to package that difference into the next available executive. So that would not be next Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, where we would expect to put that in. So kind of helpful message from our MIP editor who points out that I guess it's not so much even recently revised, but the revised MIP 39C3 indicates that an offboarding core unit should conduct all wind down activities within 4 months from the ratification date of the offboarding. I know in this case, we kind of have a, I don't know how to best qualify it, but Will has said basically that he plans to end all operations the day before the end of the vote. I believe that timing is correct. So on this end, everything would be done and it would be up to the DAO to fulfill any obligations that were voted in. I don't know if the auditors for Real World Finance want to speak to it, or any of the members of the operational wallet that might be helpful as well. Circling out the Pinky Promises comment in the chat.
All right, so do we want to move forward, Peyton?
Fine by me. There are a few other comments in the chat, but if no one wants to hop on the mic, we can move on.
All right, so the next discussion topic is the EndGame pre-launch MIPS. As you saw in the MIPS update segment, the current set is passing with over 90% approval rate. And I believe that's a total of like something like 95,000 MKR weight approximately. And so the big question that we want to discuss today is what happens if they pass? And this is a question that we've been talking about for basically like the last month, if not more. And so I prepared a handful of slides to kind of cover some of the bases. So number one, if this MIP passes, the MIP1 problem space changes. MIP1 outlined the initial things that basically maker governance needed to pursue at the beginning of its formation, beginning of the DAO's formation. So that's going to change. It prioritizes the formation of a constitution, which will outline sort of the rules of engagement between meta DAOs and maker core governance. It also will prioritize the creation of EndGame product MIPs and scope MIPs for the workforce divisions, as well as the tokenomics MIP. And finally, all of this should be done before the creation of a final meta DAO activation MIP, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, so that's one piece of it. And then the next piece, if this MIP passes, some governance processes are changing. So there's going to be no more signal requests for parameter changes, no more MIP6 applications, no more green light process, and it's going to add clustering framework for protector and creator metadAOs. Yeah, as well, if this MIP passes, some mandates are changing. Strategic finances mandate is changing, risks mandate is changing, and collateral engineering services mandate is changing. The details can be found in the corresponding MIPs. And then the last slide I have is that if this MIP set passes, the protocol-owned vault emulation, I believe is what that stands for, becomes a priority. So it's governance controlled. 20 million DAI will be drawn out to start. And then the mandate, this is going to include mandated action by the risk CU, which grants them emergency powers. And by them, I mean the facilitator grants the facilitator emergency powers, where he or she can stop purchases, can adjust the DSS kiln parameters, and also can liquidate the protocol-owned vault. And so, before I move on to the discussion segment, I want to give it over to, well, actually, maybe not give it over, but give the opportunity for Peyton. If you want to speak to any of these in more detail, feel free.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, a quite large MIP set, so I don't want to highlight any part more than the others. We'll either probably keep it open to questions. Hopefully this is a nice overview, a jumping off point for all the things that are included within that MIP set. I'm starting to see some questions in chat, so might take a moment to read that. From one of our recognized delegates, I have, can someone speak to the process and plan for coming up with a constitution and how that would be drafted and ratified? And how does that compare with Hasu's proposal on simple maker DAO? Thanks, Acre Invest, for that one. I guess the simplest way to answer that is that within the pre-MIP set, it's not specified, right? So it would have to be a standalone or a separate governance motion. that would draft a constitution. As for how it might differ to different plans out there, that would depend on what's in it, obviously. I think the general idea is to kind of gather more aspects from the overall plan itself and try to put that into a less mutable form. Obviously, the way maker governance is now is that anything is kind of up for grabs, right? At any governance cycle, people can propose whatever changes they want. We have MKR voters and our delegates who read those and vote on them. And based on what is passed, we accept those changes and get to work implementing them. So as kind of shown in the slides there's a broad set of changes for this pre-launch MIP set. However, a lot more changes have been alluded to in the overall in-game plan. And on the governance end, it's kind of like, well, we don't know exactly when each substantive change is going to be proposed. So I don't want to set anything in stone before anyone wishes to do so. But in terms of the changes we have now, it's basically the mandated changes, the protocol and vault engine there. The biggest, I guess, tangible result is going to be the dropping of open-ended signal requests, right? Basically, GovAlpha is being instructed by this process to not accept random signal requests on the forum. So unless they are specified in a MIP, they would not proceed unless they find a facilitator who wishes to use their powers and get a poll listed. Seeing some more questions here. Happy to keep talking. For Maker asks, I just want to know who or what will be tasked with these priorities. That is always the fun part in the DAO, right? GovAlpha obviously is one to take a look at a lot of the things that are passed and ask people if they plan to do work for it. But if there's work outside of our ability, we certainly can't enforce it getting done any more than notifying the community as to what has been passed and what has currently been done. Seeing a follow-up question here about the Constitution. Is it a gating item for any other mandates? Hard to say without reading it. I think, like, from what Rune has said so far, the idea is that, like, this pre-launch MIP set is putting us in the direction of tackling on in-game. So if it's passed, we get to work on those items, one of those items being the Constitution that will be more solidified in terms of, like, what can be changed and how easily, right? I think in terms of governance, right, there's this expectation of, like, a constitution is meant to be much more rigid, much more longstanding, and much harder to change than normal laws and procedures. So in that case, I would suspect some gating to take place with it. But again, until a proposal is made, it could contain anything to any degree of gating.
Yeah, pros, just to jump in there also, I think the idea of gating is a good one to add, because I think in the endgame plan, there's a lot implied, but it's not explicitly written out or documented. So I think on the technical side, we're going to have to put our heads together, figure out, okay, what elements need to be tackled first, even if they're longer out in the overall scheme of endgame. So there's a lot of stuff mentioned in Phoenix stance, which may need to be worked on earlier. So we're going to have a task to map that out and then share with the community and show what our view of priorities are and get buy-in. So I think that will have to form a part of what the Constitution starts mapping out, and we won't know until we have all of that on the table. So there'll be a bunch of work with that to do, yeah.
Thanks.
And that's going to be across a whole bunch of stuff, like not only Phoenix stands hardening automation work, but also MetaDAO tokenomics, vaults, pools, that sort of stuff. So there's going to be a few sets of parallels, and we have to be careful about how much we all collectively sign up for at the one point in time, because as always, there's only so much work that can get done. So we'll have to just map it out, illustrate it, and then we can plan through what the iteration and implementation looks like.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Derek. That is helpful. Obviously, in-game plan touches a wide degree of core units and their mandates, so a lot of people might feel compelled to work on particular parts of it or unable to do others. We did see a question here from Jacob asking that Rune has said that like MIP4, which is the kind of a mid-MIP, could still be used to repel the in-game MIP set. And yeah, basically, unless there's a rule passed saying that there's no more amendments, that would stand and could still be used, right? Basically, our MIPs are our closest thing we have to a constitution at the moment, right? It's just our bylaws that dictate what rules of engagement we have for governance proposals. So GovAlpha's job is to try to uphold whatever the maker holders pass to the best of our abilities. We do that in a transparent way where we tell you guys, hey, we're interpreting this as XYZ. So here's will be our decision going forward. And yeah, no plans to change that with or without endgame, right? It's basically just a lot of changes at once, which does add some complexity, but the base rules of, well, if the MIP holders pass it, that is the direction the DAO is going in. And our job as GovAlpha is to try to maintain that order and basically allow the platform that is the voting portal to be used based on the rules that have been passed by maker token holders. I'm getting a little tired of talking, David. I don't know if you want to read out some of these questions or I'd invite others to hop on the mic as well, because my opinions are largely my own and I have a neutrality mandate, which sometimes makes this stuff a bit more tricky to improvise answers to on the fly.
Yeah, I hear you, Peyton. I hear you. So there are a number of different comments. I guess I'll just start from the bottom up. So following on 𝘰𝘮𝑧's comments, what is the possibility of breaking this into bite-sized technical, social, and governance chunks? Like, you know, can we just do one meta DAO, for example, to start, or are we jumping straight into it? Sorry, I kind of editorialized your question a little bit, make man.
Yeah, but they're having a good point there that like even if the big MIPs do seem to dictate doing all this at once, practically it is quite difficult to do a bunch of items in parallel. So some sort of segmenting or kind of order operations will probably have to be agreed upon by people doing the work. But yeah, it's kind of up to interpretation how exactly that's going to be done. I think a lot of us are waiting to see what the final vote will be, and then we're planning to get to work based on that. So as a reminder, that vote does end on Monday, and it'll be a bit easier to really speak in absolutes rather than what may or may not happen at that point. Yeah, Josh from the MIPI core unit pointing out there that he does currently have a MIP up for changing part of the protocol and vault there. So yeah, do check that out if you get the chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see anything else in the chat that we haven't like highlighted or talked about yet. If anybody wants to correct me on that, yeah, feel free. All right, next topic. Yeah, I guess we could leave it here for like a minute or two, see if anybody has any other like questions, like big points that they want to raise. I saw Frank, your microphone flashed on and off. So Frank, if you want to say something, go for it.
Yeah, no, just on the question of just starting off with one meta DAO, I think, in my opinion, you know, to build a new organization, organizing principle, I should say, you need more than just one, right? Because you need to kind of create this circle of, and for lack of a better word, I'm using circle, of different clusters, right? Where, excuse me, where each cluster has the ability to kind of work with each other and also somehow cluster together to become a meta DAO. But what happens is if you get one meta DAO, I think you won't be able to kind of grow that ecosystem, right? Because that ecosystem should also rely on ecosystem actors or even third-party outsource providers that can come in and maybe outbid an ecosystem actor, say on building a front end as an example. So that's why it's important that I think that you need more than one MetaDAO. You know, whether it's 2, 3, 5, or 6 or 7, whatever is proposed right now, I don't know. But eventually, the idea, in my opinion, the way I view it is 10 years from now, you know, you're going to have probably a good 600 of them. Some will fail, some will thrive, some will become big time ecosystem actors that are going to do some huge business with the MetaDAOs. Some are not, and you might even get like a third party, you know, famous company that's out there right now dealing with one of these. So yeah, the idea to go with one MetaDAO is interesting, right? Because everyone I know is afraid. This is new. This is interesting. This could completely fail. But in order to get that organizing principle, in my opinion, you need to have, you know, the clusters, the MetaDAOs, if you could imagine a big circle, and then the outside you have all these ecosystem, or I don't know, call them supporting nodes, all right, for lack of a better word. They could be production nodes, it could be design nodes for a creator MetaDAO, and they come into that circle and they kind of do the work of all those MetaDAOs, whether it's 5 or 6, what have you. That's the way I like to visualize it. So I think it'd be just, you wouldn't get any traction with one MetaDAO, in my opinion.
So,
you know,
so really quick, if I could jump in here, my understanding is that the way that the clusters MIP is presented, that we're really starting with 2 MetaDAOs, right? The creator MetaDAO and the protector MetaDAO, and then there's all of these sort of clusters that are forming between the two. So taking the thread from what you're saying, Frank, it sounds like this is sort of the minimally viable way to start, right? With just 2.
Yeah, and I think out of those clusters that you spoke about, you probably could get a 3 within, I can't say a time frame, but you know, a lot of it is going to come down to, in my opinion, of how fast you can build the front ends, right? I know that Dux is going to be under a heavy workload to get this out, right? Because that front end that we went over yesterday in the DVC meeting, where people are able to use the MKR to delegate it to delegates or what have you. That's super important part of this, right? But I don't know if, you know, we can get off 2 MetaDAOs quickly and then have a third within, say, 4 weeks. That could be possible. But the way I visualize it is that you're going to need more than 2. Minimum, in my opinion, should be 6, 8, 10. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but in order to build that ecosystem, and each one, again, in my opinion, is going to have its own ecosystem, you're going to need kind of a fast traction. Hopefully not too fast, because MakerDAO is used to going very slowly, but that's the way I'm thinking about it. You know, I don't think that if you get just two MetaDAOs that you get much traction in the next 12 months.
Appreciate your thoughts there, Frank.
So there's a nice question from Nadia, like what will happen with core units if the focus is on clusters and MetaDAOs? And I guess like maybe I could speak to this from my perspective as a core unit facilitator doing an operations and communications function, which is, you know, not a creator, it's not a protector. We're basically like organizational infrastructure, for lack of a better characterization. So maybe we're like a governor meta-DAO, but I know those are kind of like not really a thing anymore in the plan. So from my perspective as an operational team, I'm going to continue, presenting myself as a core unit that belongs to Maker Core. And I don't think the core unit framework has been stripped. That's not part of the pre-launch endgame MIP set. So I think there's room for this parallelism to occur. And I think eventually, like when it is obvious where my team should go, if we should go that way, then we will transition, right? But in the meantime, I think like core units should, basically see what's happening with clustering and meta-DAOs and see where they might fit in. But otherwise, like, obviously don't skip your budget proposals and like operate as usual. That's the route that I've been going. So yeah, curious what others have to say.
I guess worth noting that, Rune has said like basically a year minimum from when the pre-launch stuff passes from when we might actually see meta-DAOs. So obviously there's a lot of work and a lot of things that have to be figured out during that time. And yeah, a lot of the mandates are about keeping the DAO running, right? So we would certainly hope that those people wouldn't feel like they don't have a space or that this changes like kind of their key responsibilities on the governance end. And if nothing passes, changing something, like it just keeps going. So something to keep in mind, certainly, if you have a mandate and you have a budget, unless you're trying to step back from it. The kind of expectation with the public comms is that you are still covering those things.
Yeah, so Boca, I encourage you to join the Wednesday endgame DVC to ask that question. I also am curious about that question personally. And I guess for the recording, the question is, I understand that part of the purpose is meta-DAOs, and so for them to shield the wider maker community from office politics of individual working groups. But how will that be accomplished if the launch meta-DAOs are going to receive ongoing MKR payments? Won't that put them under the microscope? So yeah, good question. Yeah, sorry, go for it, Peyton.
I'm going to do the same thing. I suspect it's just Ladder had a comment about the kind of 1 year transition, maybe not necessarily matching the like urgency of the problems that were being addressed. Yeah, I think Ruud has very much said like these things we need to start getting to work now if we're going to address these things. But in terms of when the plan could actually kick in place, like there's a lot of technical items that have to be sorted out. There's obviously social items in terms of clustering, who's trying to work where, and there's just a lot of things that have to be answered, and that's objectively going to take some time.
Yeah, I think something that I caught off the DVC yesterday was that after these pass, if they pass, Rune is basically gonna go for, I can't remember actually, maybe I shouldn't speak because I can't remember specifics, but if I'm not mistaken, he said the next step was to basically reform like the roles of the DAO, like basically that constitution stuff. But I think he was gonna focus on redoing like the definition of the delegate role, and also the compensation framework, and then like there was some other stuff. So yeah, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I am curious, like, so Nadia's question is really great. Like, we should understand if current mandate plus budgets of existing core units represent MKR holders' vision if the endgame plan is approved. Like, I mean, this sounds like a question for delegates. How are you going to vote on core units moving forward during this transition phase?
Yeah, from 3F delegates point of view, it's a really tough question. I mean, there are some core units that are essential to keeping the protocol working, right? So, I think that my opinion, this is just 3F delegates' opinion. I don't know how the other 21 plus delegates and counting are thinking about it, but I think that if you're a core unit that provides a service that can equate to an ecosystem actor, you should start thinking about how you can provide that service, either as an ecosystem actor or perhaps as a member of a cluster. The whole point of this is that this is a DAO, right? And you're free to do what you want. You don't work for any entity, right? It's a DAO. And you should really be thinking about, if the end game plan does get approved, how you're going to fit into that clustering and meta DAO ecosystem actor, or even, as I called it, the nodes on the outside of everything of the circle that provides the services to make sure that DAO continues to prosper for the next 1,000 years. You should really be thinking about that. So from 3F perspective, to answer your question, yeah, that's a tough one, right? Like, I think about some of the budgets that are being put forward right now, such as tech ops. There's a couple of other there that don't come to mind right now, but you need to ask, as a delegate, you need to ask yourself which one of these core units really needs to keep the core churning away, for lack of a better word, to keep working like a locomotive, and what core units can become part, if the end game plan does get approved, an ecosystem actor. Because the truth of the matter is, whether 3F delegate agrees with some of my DAO brothers and sisters, at the end of the day, it's all love, right? We all have the good intention, right, of making sure this DAO prospers. So I like to see everyone continue to, as long as you are here for the right reasons, right? Getting back to not being a grifter, I'm all for it, man. If you could find a role somewhere, somehow, and we can all build it together, whether we disagree or agree. And look, sometimes I think some of the stuff that some of the folks that I might not agree with, they kind of wake me up, and I'm like, oh man, this does make sense. I kind of see it, why they feel this way. So, but yeah, simple answer is, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there as far as core unit budgets that are being proposed. I know there's going to be a plethora of them going into the end of the year, beginning of the year. So it'd be interesting to hear what the other delegates think, and how they're thinking about that as well. But, I do envision one day the core obviously just being maybe a handful of I don't even know if you want to call them core units, but just ecosystem providers that keep the core going, and then the meta DAOs doing their own thing as their own, for lack of a better word, small enterprises that are just working to push the ethos of decentralization forward. So yeah, man, sorry for ranting.
I appreciate the participation, Frank.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, well, we're a few minutes early, but appreciate everyone participating today. Seems like we might have more to say once the vote's finalized, and maybe even break into more specific call to drop better commentary. But do want to say a big thanks for everyone joining us. It's really great that we get to share this space with you. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Let's keep the conversations going in the forum. And yeah, talk to y'all soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone, the